Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Chat EbT. I'm your host, Mohamed Ebrahim Tayob. Now, we hear this phrase, titan of industry, quite often. Today, I get to sit with one. I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast, Mr. Ashraf Garda.
Yeah, thank you. I've never been called a titan of industry before, but okay, thank you.
No, I love it, man. You know what? We got in contact a couple of weeks ago. It's been absolutely amazing following your journey. Gotta say, I'm a big fan, so if I come across a little starstruck today, I apologize. But yeah, very excited to chat to you, man.
Much appreciated. But listen, talk about the fan. Just if I can just rebound off that, we know how big Chat EbT is, right?
Yeah.
And therefore the Chat EbT, when I saw it, like that's such an interesting hook, because that means you can never forget that. So well done to you.
No, I gotta say while we're saying that, because last time I actually forgot to say this, and I got a lot of flack from my sister from saying it. She actually came up with the name.
Okay.
So big shout out to my sister Mukarisa, who came up. Last time she got so upset with me.
Okay. Well, there we are.
I didn't say it. So we were actually sitting on Chat EbT looking for names for the podcast, and EbT has been a nickname of mine for such a long time. And she said, "How about Chat EbT?" And I was like, "There we go. That's the one."
Well, works.
Can't look back. Ashraf, so a big part of our topic, and in all honesty, a big reason for me starting this podcast is I've actually been very interested in people that have pivoted in their careers, right? Now, as I understand, you started off your career in a family business, and then pivoted to broadcasting, TV, sports, so on and so forth. Explain to us that journey and how that transition happened.
Well, I mean, historically, we had a family fashion store, then we had a curtain manufacturing business, and then we had a upmarket fabric business that I co-owned with my wife. That's the historical part of it, right? How this happens, we often hear people say your career is never linear, it happens by chance. So there was this obvious innate dream that I had that, like, this broadcasting thing is cool. And I say dream, not that you want it must happen, but because you always enjoyed listening to people at that time.
Yeah.
Like, I really did enjoy it, okay? But what really happened was this, and it's quite simple. Point one, I was the chairman of a local football club in our community in Homestead Park. Point B, community radio was just starting up in the middle 90s, with democracy starting. So up to that size, there was no community radio. It was just radio, national TV. Community radio did not exist, right? So local football clubs have a local football tournament.
Yeah.
There's a community radio that exists in our area called Al-Zahir, which then quickly changed to The Voice, okay? And this is the turning point. My interest was, as the chairman of the local football club, is contacting the local community radio station to say, hold it, kids never get their names heard on radio. Just think about it at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, never, right? Why don't you guys cover the local football tournament, okay? And they'll get their names heard. You guys will be exposed to a new audience. What you do with them on the Monday is your problem, but at least you've got that, a new audience, right? They said, okay, why don't you set up the guests? So unknown to me, I was being the producer. And okay, if I need to get this person, we must get that guy, but this one doesn't work. So we got a whole lot of, football club managers and some lighties to be interviewed the day before their cup final, junior cup final days, right? And that was Saturday night. And on the Saturday morning, I still remember getting a call from the team. Now, up to then, I was facilitating them being interviewed by whoever. And in the morning, they're like, you know what? We just thought about it. None of us can do sport. We can talk about other things. And this is early days of community radio. So I said, okay, it's like, can you do it for us? Now, that was not the plan. It was not the plan at all, right? So on that very first day that I go on radio, community radio, we interview, probably had like 6 people in the studio at one stage, which, you would understand would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But anyway, that was done. But 2 things stuck out for me. One is, like, 5 minutes into being on air, I still remember the station manager putting up a sign in between, the studio and the glass frontage saying, and she had the sign like that was sitting up there. It's like something like, your enthusiasm is infectious. Welcome aboard.
Oh, lovely.
I haven't stopped talking since then.
That's brilliant.
The story, right? That's the one thing. So then we do the interview. Sunday is cup final day. Now, remember, it's community radio. It's like a few hundred listeners. We don't even know, right? And on cup final day, when, you know, as usual, there's people commenting about which goal was offside and which one was, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. People were coming up to me to say, you see, we were robbed. You must talk about it on radio tomorrow. Or can you see they gave the man of the match to Ibi, but not to Yusuf. You must talk about it on radio tomorrow. And in that moment, I grasped the power of it. To say, just by having a platform as you have now,
Yeah.
you're a go-to person. So then what we did, I said, okay, it was never part of the plan. So we said, okay, that was the Saturday preview. Sunday was cup final day. Let's do a review on the Monday, which was not the plan. So we did that. We spoke to some of the winners and whatever, right? And that really was the entry into broadcasting, right? It's crazy, but I must also tell you that a good 4 or 5 years before that, now you must think, looking at the context, we're talking about apartheid South Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was national radio, national TV, some commercial stations, predominantly white, right? Community radio didn't exist. None of that sort existed. So entries to get into those areas were, you like wish, but it's not happening, right? So a good few years before that, I actually did a very short-term 3-week course in broadcasting, which sort of just piqued my interest. It was very academic. But when I did this one, after about 1.5 years of doing this on community radio, I was getting calls regularly, like, what are you doing here? You need to move on to better places. You're clearly cut out for this, right? And at that stage, it was like, this is just what we're all hanging out, we're having fun, man, right? And then I got into a radio course, which is like a 5-week or a whatever intensive course from a company called ABC Ulwazi. And I remember, you know, you're like 20 people there, but that was intense training of understanding media, right? And the course moderator, you know, before you start with many of these courses, like, okay, write down on the wall, like, why are you here? You know, and you know, people have their reasons. I want to be famous. I want to be whatever, right? But it's all anonymous. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I wrote my, but all very anonymous. And she was reading up all these different things from these different people that she doesn't know who they are. And then she said, look, this guy here, whoever you are, you seem to have a quite arrogance about yourself and a confidence about yourself. And I want to just warn you that it's very difficult to crack it into mainstream media, but I wish you well. But I mean, she doesn't know she's talking about me, okay? Now, of course, you're going to ask me, like, what did I
I was about to say, you got to tell us, what did you write?
I wrote something like, I'm here because I want to finish the course and be so darn good, right? And that I will so darn impress you that you will ensure that once I'm done here, you will open up doors for me.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so brilliant.
After the course, she chatted with me. She said, listen, what's your plans? What's your ambitions, right? She still didn't know I was the one who wrote the stuff because it never got discussed, right? And I said, whatever. She said, listen, it's difficult to crack it, but let me make some calls for you. I'm going to try. So in effect, what I'd wanted manifested.
Yeah.
Now, she didn't get me a position, but she did make some phone
sort of
calls,
introductions.
right? And that's really what happened. So it polished me enough to the point where after I did that course, I knew I could crack it. Now it was a case of where do I fit in? And where do I fit in comes with a bit of luck, as often does happen, right? 5FM were doing, I mean, they're a music station, but they had sport and news throughout the week, right? And they had created an opening for weekend sport that was new, right? Because they had a sponsor. I think Powerade was involved with it. It's like, let's do this. And they needed a sports presenter. And I got wind, my friend, Eunice Solomon, right? A good friend of mine, who had, of course, we met at The Voice, right? He was working at SABC, and he said, listen, these guys are looking for a sports guy, but they're not going to advertise it mainstream. They want 3-4 names, and they're going to just check them out. So he said, why don't you send a demo? And I did that, right, to them. And they came back. There was no short listing after that. They came back, they met me, they said, right, you start next week. That's the story. So my first time I ever got paid to be on air was at 5FM. And I remember at that stage, like, oh, you're at 5FM, like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's
you know,
I think today that would be such a big deal.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really what happened. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And it just shows that, you know, we've spoken about it as well before. It's sort of that passion for the product. And if you have that passion for the product in anything that you got to do, you sort of need to have that little bit of passion because that comes out. I'm sure when 5FM were watching that interview, that was what they saw, right?
Yeah.
And that's why there was no other shortlist.
Yeah. And you know, you don't ask to say, well, you chose me. Like, what about the other guy? You
Yeah, you just
the
happy.
door's open, and you smash it down and you grab it. And I mean, I remember those first few days. You're on there once, and I still remember saying, okay, I'm on day 1. Can I get to day 2? Because you have no idea. There's a job insecurity, right? It's like, can I get day 2? And then day 2 became day 10 and day 20. And you realize, like, actually, you're doing this regularly. Well, like, day 20 is like 20 years now, you know, that type of thing. Yeah.
You know, as you're talking about that, I got a bit of a funny story with regards to that as well. So I actually started my little venture into, say, TV, right?
Yeah.
Also completely by luck. It was, and that time they used to do they still do those pledge shows during Ramadan.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine who I was doing some emceeing and stuff like that, because I really love talking. It's sort of like a passion of mine. And somebody that I actually emceed for gave me a call and he said, hey, what are you doing tonight? And I said, no, nothing. So he's like, do you want to be on TV? And in my head that time, it was like, okay, I got to do the emceeing thing.
Yeah.
I really want to do the TV thing now.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%. It's like, okay, so there's this pledge show.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be on it, but there was unfortunately, somebody was very sick in the family or something like that. He needs to fly to Durban. He's like, I really like the way you emceed. Would you mind taking my spot? It's not much. You just have to go and sit there, answer 1 or 2 questions. And I was like, yeah, great. This is what I've been waiting for. I go to the studio that day, and I'm sitting in what they would call the green room. And the head of the studio comes in and he goes, okay, well, already there was 2 other people there. And he says, so who's hosting this thing? And the 2 people said, this guy. And I literally went, no. Sorry, man. I'm taking over for this guy. He called me last minute. So those 2 people were actually from the organization, the charity organization. And they were like, you have to do it. And I went, but I've never done this before. Like, this is not what I signed up for. And they said, look, we have absolutely no experience. I understand you have a little bit of experience. Please, we're in this situation. And, 30 minutes later, they're miking me up and I'm shivering, absolutely shivering. It was one of the scariest things I've ever had to do. But looking back, that phone call, led to this today. So.
And they were right.
Yeah.
They were right. Yeah.
100%. If you don't mind me, so let's take it a little bit back, right? So you obviously, you mentioned this is the way you got your start. Today, a lot of people want to sort of get into this industry, but I think they look at it as a very closed up industry. You need to know somebody in particular. You need to, go through a certain courses and stuff like that. And I think most people are very deterred, me included, from actually just trying to get in because they feel like it's just going to be a failure right out the bat. What would you say to those people that are interested in maybe going to the radio broadcasting or TV broadcasting, who want to get into the industry and just don't know where to begin?
Well, look, I mean, firstly, the point of it being difficult, like, what's more difficult, to become a radio host or to make it in the Springbok rugby team? It's probably more difficult in the Springbok rugby team.
Yeah.
Or to become the imam at the big mosque in Makkah. You get my point.
Yeah.
In whichever career you choose, right, it's going to be difficult. Whoever suggested that the doors are just going to be paved open for you, it's not going to happen like that. You have to put in the hard yards. You have to put in the work. And yes, it's not linear. It's not about favors. Nobody's going to give you, even like when you were on as a stand-in, if you didn't do the job, they would have replaced you after 5 minutes because there would be pressure. And when I did that thing with the sports thing, ultimately you have to deliver. So you have to be good at what you do. So my thought is, speak to people who've done it, because that's the free advice you can get. Not even the textbook. Speak to people who've actually done it. And sometimes in today's world, you can either speak to them by saying, can I meet you for coffee? But actually, as you and I are talking now, I'm mentoring them right now.
Yeah.
So just watching us on TV, I'm speaking to them. So follow these type of conversations and pick out gems you can learn and then get the type of advice. But then you do need to then, apply at the right places, and you need to be doggedly determined, and you're going to be rejected as well. Because for every one of us who's been accepted in certain forms, we've also been rejected. You always wonder, like, I wish I could do this and I wish I could do that. And some things just never materialize. But when you get the opportunity, honestly, just don't be lazy, man. This nonsense about, like, you know what, I just want to coast mid-table. You know,
Yeah,
I don't want to win the league. I don't want to get relegated because that means losing a job. But you see, if I can just coast mid-table, I'm okay. No, that's just not going to happen. In a competitive world where even as you and I are talking now, I can tell you now, there's someone watching us. I'm like, you know what? Not even saying, I wish I could be Ashraf. They're actually going to say, I wish I can be EB. They're hoping that they could actually present the show like this. So there's always, and that is the nature of things. So there's always going to be someone who actually not wants your job, no, who sees in your space a space for themselves.
Yeah.
And the only way you can stay in this space is like, you know, in sporting terms, you have to win your games. You've got to win every game that you play.
One of the things that I've just been so fascinated with recently is Champion South Africa, right?
I'm glad.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal because, you know, here's the thing. I got to be honest, right? I moved to the UK a couple of years ago. And, you know, I feel bad saying it, actually a little bit ashamed saying it right now. But I was actually very soured towards our country. So when I had the opportunity, I grabbed it with open arms, right? And, you know, everything happened the way it happened. And I found myself back in South Africa. And we're looking at things like this, Champion SA, and we get to see so much of the amazing things that are happening in our country. And it goes back to always the case. Everybody always focuses on the negative. The media always shows the negative. You're on the news, it's negative. We do need that positivity, right? And I think that's what you guys are doing brilliantly with Champion South Africa, is showing that, you know what, we're not just what we see on the news. We're not just what people think we are. We are South Africa, and we are Champion South Africa, right?
Well, I mean, you know, first of all, I'm going to disagree with you about your point about the media always shows the negativity. In fact, reading media now, you and I talking, there's nothing negative about what we're talking about. We're talking about something so aspirational, about building your life and hopefully inspiring you to be a champion at what you do. And then not just for yourself and for your country. So what's so negative about that? But the reality is I can think of 100 things every day, from people passing matric to someone helping somebody in the street. The point is the media portrays life. And there are aspects of life that are very negative. If there's an earthquake, the media can't ignore that earthquake.
Yeah.
If there's a genocide in Palestine, the media can't ignore it. So let's just focus on the nice things in the world, right? But it focuses on good and the bad. What's important for you as a listener or a viewer or a consumer of the media is by watching all of that, how do you then internalize all of that? So the media will portray the reality of the world, which is everything. Right?
No, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think from a Champion South Africa perspective, you're right. You know, Champion South Africa is a fascinating word, the word champion. Because champion means best in class, right? But champion also, so that's the noun, best in class. But champion also means verb. As a verb, it means striving for something. So you're best in class, you're a champion, but you strive to pursue a great cause, so you're championing that cause, right? It's just a wonderful play on words. So in our case, we do two things. When we say Champion South Africa, we say, can you be the champion in South Africa? But can you raise South Africa's level so that we can think of it as being called Champion South Africa, not Loser South Africa, Champion South Africa. But at the same time, it's a challenge to you and I and everybody else to say, of all the things in the world that you do, like, how do you champion South Africa? How do you strive for your country? Because if you're not going to do it, why would you expect someone else to do it? You don't expect Donald Trump to do it. I mean, he's not going to champion South Africa. He's championing the USA. So what are you doing for your own country? How do you champion South Africa? And that really is the essence of who we are.
It sort of goes back to that phrase, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, we use the phrase, we say champion people build champion nations. Because if you look at the history of the world, right, that ultimately certain countries have geographical advantage, some countries have mineral advantages, right? Others have sort of inherited advantages, but ultimately they can all rise and fall based upon the people, right? And I mean, there are two examples that come to mind immediately for me. One is Singapore, which was part of what was called Malaya at the time, the smallest island in Malaya. They couldn't wait to get rid of it, and they got rid of it, and now it's a jewel in the crown in the entire region. As a small city-state, I don't know, it's probably not bigger than Lensman if people know the areas. I mean, that's what it is, right?
It's crazy. It's become a powerhouse in the world.
So it's crazy, that's one. But the other is, let's look at our own prophetic tradition of what they call the Medina Islam, the Medina example. Without being too religious, because I'm not a religious scholar, but what I do know is when we talk about the first generation of Muslims, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we're talking about his friends, the Sahaba, right? His chommies, really, they are. And what are we saying? They were sufficient in number who were connected to one vision and wanting to realize that vision no matter what to ensure it happened. And they did that. And what happened as a result? They developed that city-state of Medina into effectively a champion nation. Think about it.
Yeah,
right?
very true.
So nations rise and nations fall. Ultimately, the deciding factor is the people. And therefore, the challenge of South Africa or any other country is, can we get together a group of people, right, that are like-minded, that understands who we are now, that understands what the shortcomings are, but what our strengths are, and how we're going to get to where we want to go. But to be doggedly determined in that vision or in that purpose that we want to build, what we call, for us, end goal is, can we build a champion nation? And a champion nation really means, we don't have to be too academic about it. It just means everything works. We're best in class in education, best in class in understanding, in eliminating inequality, best in class in being anti-racist, best in class in being diverse with different expressions of religious expression as we have in our country, and tolerance, and no crime, and the things that are pretty obvious to all of us, right? I mean, that must be the ideal. But for that to happen, we need the people to be champions. So champion people must then build the champion nation.
No, I love that. And if you don't mind me asking, so what was the spark that just said, we are in need of this, and I'm going to make this happen?
Well, it is a case of me and we. My son Zaid, the two of us had a chat, and we were just talking about highlighting things that reflect excellence. And the idea then came about to say, let's honor and identify people in that space. Now, that's how it started. And that's how we formed the setup called Champion South Africa. A lot of it has evolved in the few years since then, from a position of purely identifying winners to also identifying good causes. And therefore, the verb, how do you champion? So if I look at another example, and you may have seen in recent months, we've, let me get that right. You may have seen in recent months, we identified, or we asked about 100 people to say, we'd like you to share how you champion South Africa. So that's the verb now. It's not about saying you're the best in class. We're saying we identify you as someone that we think are leaders in your space. Now, we know how other people champion whatever they do. How do you champion South Africa? And we leave it to them to give us their one line, and they share their one line, and that's what they do. So now we'll stop at 100. It depends whether you're going to watch this pre or post, because the shows get recorded at different times and watched on YouTube and whatnot. But the plan is that we'll stop at 100, and then we'll have 100 people sharing the ideas of how they champion South Africa. The next step really is to then create some events around that. So we need some sponsors, because we do need that, to say who can align with us, to say, can we get those events funded and sponsored so that we can get the same people, not to share a line, but to expand on the one line to 15 minutes or 20 minutes about how they champion South Africa, and ultimately why. Because really, you do need that one spark. I often in my conversations mix, religion and politics with sport. I mean, if you follow rugby, for example, I mean, how was rugby formed? Rugby, you had football as we knew it, or we'd call soccer, football. And they were playing football in a school in England, as you would score a normal goal. I mean, maybe the goals were bigger, but we're talking about 100 years ago. Until this one lighty decided, well, I'm going to do things my own way. When the ball was passed to him, instead of kicking the ball, he picked it up. And before they could stop him, because of course it was a handball, right? Before they could stop him, he darted from where he was, like say, in the middle of the pitch, right down to the goals, and then decided not even kick it. He just put the ball into the net, touched it down, and that's my goal. And that's the beginning of rugby. And where was that started? It was started at a school called rugby.
Oh, wow.
That's where it is. The school
Okay.
was called rugby, right? But the point I want to make is And William Webb Ellis, of course, was this youngster, and that's why the whole trophy is named after him, right? But so don't underestimate your impact. It could be one day, it could be 1 week. It can truly change the world. There are many examples of that. Just 1 or 2 decisions taken, and then you can get people to buy into it. And if you can sell your vision and they go with you on that journey, and you can change your society. And I think for most of us watching today, I'm not naive to say go and change the country. But, champion nations are built by champion communities. What you can influence is your community. And sometimes it's geographic, right, where you live, or sometimes it's a community of interest, like-minded people who may be accountants like yourself, or it could be, a community of a certain religious grouping or ethnicity, or whatever. It could be sportsmen, right? So can we just change things in that community? So if you build a champion community and we multiply the idea of champion communities, I often talk about, as we're talking now, people are like, okay, but I can't change the whole world, right? But the reality is you can change your community. And, champion nations are built on champion communities.
Yeah.
So if you have a community that rises up to champion level in the country, and if others then emulate that community, so you've got like 1,000 communities, then you've got the basis of a champion nation. The focus must be on community. In politics, we always talk about wards, right? But it doesn't have an emotional connection. Can you just build champion communities? And my role is, I'm not a politician, but if I can just simply inspire people at community level to say, can you mobilize yourself as a community and just be the very best community you can be, in the hope that you don't want to be outdoing another community, but then once you be the best at what you can do, you can then share your knowledge and build another community to be the best at what they can do. And before you know it, then you've got this whole multiplier effect across the length and breadth of a nation, and we'll be richer for that.